He asked the boy's age, 'cause he suspected that he was the son of his one-night stand with her. Hi, my wonderful story family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. I want to share something from my heart. Lately, I've felt a bit down, wondering if my stories are truly connecting with you. When my last video received less comments, it made me question if I'm doing enough to bring you joy and inspiration. Every story I create comes from a place of love and passion, and your feedback means everything to me. It's what keeps me motivated and inspired to do better. If you enjoy my stories and want me to continue, please write yes in the comments. If there's anything you'd like me to improve, I truly value your suggestions. You are my story family, and your support makes this journey worthwhile. Thank you for being here. It means the world to me. Now let's begin today's story. The glass and steel facade of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel stretched toward the starless city sky, its golden lights a stark contrast to the darkness in Cinnamon Judith's heart. Her hands trembled as she clutched her worn leather purse, the medical bills inside feeling like lead weights against her hip. 28 years old, and she'd never imagined she'd find herself in such a position. The revolving door whispered on its axis as a couple emerged, their laughter carrying on the cool evening breeze. Cinnamon watched them go, wondering if she'd ever laugh so carelessly again. The text message on her phone glowed accusingly. Room 1542, 8 p.m., DE. Miss, are you coming in? The doorman's voice was gentle, concerned. He'd been watching her pace for the last 10 minutes. Cinnamon squared her shoulders, forcing a smile. Yes, thank you. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she crossed the lobby, each step echoing like a countdown in her mind. The elevator ride was a blur of mirrors and memories. Her mother's face when the doctor delivered the diagnosis. Stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive, treatable, but time was of the essence. Then came the insurance company's letter. Claim denied. Pre-existing condition. A technicality that could cost her mother's life. Going up? A middle-aged businessman joined her, his expensive cologne filling the small space. Cinnamon nodded, unable to trust her voice. She watched the numbers climb. 12, 13, 14. The man got off on the 14th floor, leaving her alone with her thoughts for the final ascent. She'd heard about Darren Emerson through Sarah, her colleague at the graphic design firm. He's different, Sarah had insisted. He helps people sin, no strings attached. Well, almost none. The meaningful look in her friend's eyes had said everything words couldn't. The elevator chimed. 15th floor. Cinnamon's footsteps were muffled by the thick carpeting as she made her way down the corridor. 1538, 1540, 1542. Her knuckles barely grazed the door when it opened. Darren Emerson was younger than she'd expected, 36, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his tie was loosened, his collar unbuttoned. Human. Approachable. Miss Judith, he said softly. Please, come in. The suite was elegant but understated. A sitting area with cream-colored sofas, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, a closed door presumably leading to the bedroom. A bottle of wine sat unopened on the coffee table. Would you like a drink? He gestured to the wine. No, thank you. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Mr. Emerson. Darren, please. Darren. She took a deep breath. I appreciate you meeting with me. I understand you sometimes help people in difficult situations. He sat down, motioning for her to do the same. Tell me about your mother, Cinnamon. The genuine concern in his voice nearly broke her. She pulled out the medical documents with trembling hands. The cancer was caught early enough, the treatment could save her, but the insurance... Her voice cracked. They're saying it's not covered. The treatment costs $150,000. I've sold my car, emptied my savings, but it's not enough. I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Emerson. I'll pay back every cent. I just need time, he finished gently. You need time, and your mother needs treatment now. Cinnamon nodded, fighting back tears. Darren stood, walking to the window. The city sprawled below them, a maze of lights and shadows. I lost my own mother to cancer 5 years ago, he said quietly. The best healthcare money could buy couldn't save her. But your mother has a chance. He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. I'll help you, Cinnamon. No repayment necessary. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by suspicion. Why? Because I can. He moved closer, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne. But you know there's a condition. One night, the unspoken agreement hung in the air between them. Cinnamon stood, her legs surprisingly steady. We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, he assured her. You can walk out that door right now, no judgment. She thought of her mother, always so strong, now frail in her hospital bed. Thought of the way she still tried to smile through the pain, still worried more about Cinnamon than herself. One night to save her mother's life. Was it really such a high price? I'll stay, she whispered. Darren's hand was warm when it cupped her cheek. Are you sure? The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. Yes. His kiss was gentle, almost reverent. Cinnamon closed her eyes, telling herself this was just one night, just a means to an end. But when his arms wrapped around her, when he whispered softly against her skin, she felt something unexpected stir in her heart. Just one night, she told herself again, as he led her toward the bedroom. One night to save her mother. She couldn't have known then how that one night would change everything. Couldn't have known that in 9 months she would hold a piece of this night in her arms, with Darren's crooked smile and her own determined spirit. Couldn't have known that this desperate choice would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to an unlikely family bound by love, sacrifice, and redemption. But for now there was only this moment, this choice, this night that would echo through the years to come. Chapter 2. The Aftermath. The morning sickness hit Cinnamon like a tidal wave, sending her rushing to the bathroom of her small apartment for the 3rd time that week. As she knelt on the cold tiles, her dark hair falling around her face, the reality she'd been trying to deny could no longer be ignored. This can't be happening, she whispered to her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her hands trembling as they rested on her still flat stomach. 2 months had passed since that night at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. 2 months since Darren Emerson had changed her life in more ways than she could have imagined. Her mother's voice drifted from the living room, stronger now after 6 weeks of treatment. Cinny, are you all right, sweetheart? Fine, Mom, she called back, quickly rinsing her mouth. Just a stomach bug. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Later that afternoon, Cinnamon sat in her car outside the pharmacy, staring at the pregnancy test she'd just purchased. Her phone buzzed, another text from Darren. He'd been checking in regularly, making sure her mother's treatments were progressing well, asking if they needed anything else. His kindness only made this harder. 2 hours earlier. Your mother's latest test results are very encouraging, Dr. Patterson had said, beaming. The treatment is working exactly as we'd hoped. It's quite remarkable how quickly we were able to start, given the insurance situation. Cinnamon had managed a weak smile, remembering the morning after that night with Darren. He'd already arranged everything. The insurance problems had mysteriously vanished, the best oncologists were suddenly available, and a substantial, anonymous donation had appeared in her mother's medical account. Now, sitting in her car, Cinnamon forced herself to take the test. The longest 3 minutes of her life ticked by as she waited for the result. When 2 clear lines appeared, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Pregnant," she whispered, the word hanging in the air like a storm cloud. That evening, after ensuring her mother was comfortable, Cinnamon retreated to her tiny home office. Her graphic design work was spread across the desk, freelance projects she'd taken on to supplement her income. Her computer screen glowed with an unfinished email to Darren. "Dear Darren." The cursor blinked accusingly. How could she tell him? The memory of their night together flooded back, his gentleness, the way he'd held her as if she were precious, not just a transaction. The morning after, he'd handed her a check that made her gasp. "This is too much," she'd protested. "It's not charity," he'd said firmly. "It's the right thing to do." Now, Cinnamon deleted the draft email. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. "I can't tell him," she murmured. "He's already done so much." The next few days passed in a blur of decisions and preparations. She researched prenatal vitamins, downloaded pregnancy apps, and cried herself to sleep more than once. Each text from Darren felt like a knife twisting in her gut. 1 week later. "You're moving," Sarah's voice cracked over the phone. "Sin, you can't just leave. What about your mom's treatment?" "The doctors say she can continue at the new facility," Cinnamon explained, packing boxes as she talked. "I've already arranged everything. The air is better in the countryside, and the cost of living is lower." "Is this about Darren?" Sarah asked softly. "He asks about you. You know, at the charity events." Cinnamon's hand stilled on a framed photo of her mother. "It's better this way. He's done more than enough for us. I can't ask for more. He would want to know." "Would he?" Cinnamon challenged. "A baby wasn't part of the deal, Sarah, and I refuse to be seen as someone trying to trap a wealthy man. My child deserves better than that story." The silence on the line was heavy with unspoken words. Over the next few weeks, Cinnamon orchestrated their departure with the same attention to detail she brought to her design work. She found a small house in a quiet town 3 hours away, arranged for her mother's medical records to be transferred, and slowly began declining projects that would have connected her to her old life. Her mother, still recovering but growing stronger each day, watched her with knowing eyes. One evening, as they sat on their small balcony watching the sunset over the city for the last time, she finally spoke. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Cinnamon's teacup clattered against its saucer. "How?" "I'm your mother, sweetheart." She reached for Cinnamon's hand. "And I know what sacrifice looks like. I saw it the day your father died, when you gave up your art school dreams to take care of me. I see it now." Tears spilled down Cinnamon's cheeks. "Mum, Shh." Her mother pulled her close. "Whatever you did to get my treatment, don't think I haven't guessed. It was your choice. And this baby? That's your choice too. We'll figure it out together." The moving truck arrived early on a Saturday morning. As Cinnamon watched the movers load their belongings, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Her heart stopped. It looked like Darren's, but it drove past, and she breathed again. Standing in their empty apartment, Cinnamon touched the wall where her design awards had hung. She thought of Darren, of his kindness, of the life growing inside her that was half his. For a moment, she imagined telling him, imagined seeing his face light up with that gentle smile. But then she remembered the whispers at the charity events, the way some people had looked at her after that night, like she was just another gold digger. She thought of her child, growing up under the shadow of those whispers. "No," she said firmly, "we make our own way." As they drove out of the city, Cinnamon caught a final glimpse of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in her rearview mirror. Her mother dozed in the passenger seat, peaceful in a way she hadn't been before the treatment. In the back seat, a box of prenatal vitamins was hidden under her art supplies. She placed a hand on her stomach, where her secret grew stronger each day. "It's just you and me, little one," she whispered. "Well, you, me, and Grandma. We're going to be just fine." The city skyline faded behind them as Cinnamon drove toward their new life. She didn't know then that in 9 short months she would hold a beautiful boy with Darren's crooked smile. Didn't know that in 10 years fate would bring them full circle through a child's art exhibition. But she knew with the same certainty that had driven her to save her mother's life that she was making the right choice. For now, the open road stretched before them, carrying Cinnamon and her unborn child toward a future full of uncertainty but also possibility. She had already discovered her own strength once, in that hotel room 2 months ago. She would find it again day by day as she built a life filled with love, art, and the quiet dignity of choosing her own path. Chapter 3. A New Life. Push, Cinnamon. Just one more. The midwife's voice seemed to come from far away as Cinnamon gripped the hospital bed rails, her entire world narrowing to this moment, this effort, this culmination of 9 months of preparation and worry. With a final, tremendous push and a cry that seemed to echo through the delivery room, Abraham Judith entered the world. The first wail of her son pierced through Cinnamon's exhaustion like a shaft of sunlight through storm clouds. "He's perfect," the nurse announced, placing the squirming bundle on Cinnamon's chest. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Cinnamon gazed down at her son's face, and her breath caught in her throat. There, in the curve of his tiny mouth, was Darren's unmistakable, crooked smile. Her mother, who'd been holding her hand throughout the delivery, noticed it too. "He's beautiful, Cinny," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Just beautiful." Later that night, when the hospital had quieted and her mother had gone home to rest, Cinnamon sat alone with Abraham in the dim light of her room. She traced his features with a gentle finger. Her nose, Darren's chin, a perfect blend of them both. "Hello, little Abe," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and I promise you this. You will never doubt that you are loved." 1 year later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their small house as Cinnamon balanced, Abraham on her hip, trying to feed him breakfast while simultaneously answering emails on her laptop. Her graphic design business was slowly growing, built on late nights after Abraham had gone to sleep and early mornings before he woke. "Come on, sweetie," she coaxed, offering another spoonful of oatmeal. "Just a few more bites for Mama." Abraham's laugh, so like his father's, made her heart twist. He was growing so fast, each day bringing new discoveries, new challenges, and new reminders of Darren. Sometimes, when Abraham smiled that crooked smile, Cinnamon would find herself reaching for her phone, her finger hovering over Darren's old number, which she still couldn't bring herself to delete. Her mother, now in full remission, was watching from the doorway. "You're doing an amazing job, sweetheart." "Some days I'm not so sure," Cinnamon admitted, wiping oatmeal from Abraham's chin. "Yesterday, a client asked for 3 revisions on a rush job, and Abe was teething. And you handled it all," her mother reminded her, "just like you always do." 3 years later. "Mama, look!" Abraham's excited voice echoed through their living room, now converted into a makeshift art studio. He held up a finger painting, colors swirling in surprisingly intentional patterns for a 3-year-old. Cinnamon set down her tablet, where she'd been working on a commission for a local business. "That's beautiful, baby. Tell me about it." "It's a dragon," he declared proudly, "but a nice one. He protects people." She smiled, remembering how Darren had once mentioned his love for fantasy stories. Some things, it seemed, were carried in the blood. The years had settled them into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for play and learning, afternoons for naps and client work, evenings for art and stories. Cinnamon's freelance business had grown enough to provide a modest but stable income. Her mother, fully recovered, had become the neighborhood's beloved grandmother figure, watching Abraham when Cinnamon had important meetings. 5 years later. "Mama?" Abraham's voice was serious as he sat at their kitchen table, homework spread before him. "Tommy at school says everyone has a daddy. Where's my daddy?" The question she'd been dreading for 5 years. Cinnamon sat down beside him, her heart racing. "Your daddy is someone who helped Mama and Grandma when we really needed it. He's a kind man who does good things for people." "But why isn't he here?" "Sometimes," she began carefully, "grown-ups make choices that they think are best for everyone. I chose to move here to give you a peaceful life filled with art and love." "Does he know about me?" Cinnamon pulled her son close. "No, sweetheart, but that's not because of you. It's because Mama wanted to make her own way in the world, to show you that we can be strong on our own." 7 years later. Abraham's artistic talent blossomed like a flower reaching for the sun. Their house was filled with his creations, drawings, paintings, sculptures made from found objects. Cinnamon had converted their garage into a proper studio, watching with pride as her son discovered the same passion for art that had once driven her. "He has a real gift," his art teacher told her during a parent-teacher conference. "The way he sees the world, it's extraordinary." Cinnamon knew it was true. Abraham's art had a depth that seemed beyond his years, a way of capturing emotions and moments that reminded her of her own early works, before life had taken her down a different path. 9 years later. "Mom! They want to put my paintings in the school exhibition." Abraham burst through the door, his backpack barely catching on his shoulder, his dark hair falling into his eyes just like Darren's used to. Cinnamon looked up from her design workspace, her heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Which ones?" "The whole series. The one about dreams and protecting people, like we talked about." She hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of paint and childhood that still clung to him. At 9 years old, he was growing so fast, changing every day, becoming more and more his own person while still carrying echoes of both his parents. That night, after Abraham had gone to bed, Cinnamon sat in his studio, looking at the paintings that would be displayed. They were remarkable, full of light and shadow, hope and mystery, just like the boy who created them. A notification popped up on her phone, a local art blog featuring upcoming exhibitions. Her breath caught as she read the details of Abraham's school show. It would be covered by local media, attended by art enthusiasts from across the city. For a moment, fear gripped her heart. What if Darren saw it? What if he attended? But then she looked at Abraham's paintings again, at the pure joy and talent shining through every brushstroke, and she knew she couldn't hold him back out of fear. "Your art deserves to be seen," she whispered to the quiet studio. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." She couldn't have known then that fate was already turning its wheel, that in just a few weeks Darren would stand before one of these very paintings, recognition dawning in his eyes as he saw his own smile reflected in the young artist's photo. But for now, in the peaceful quiet of their home, Cinnamon allowed herself to simply be proud of her son, of the life they'd built, of the love that filled their days. She had given Abraham a childhood filled with art and imagination, with the freedom to become whoever he was meant to be. And if sometimes, late at night, she still dreamed of Darren's kind eyes and gentle hands, well, that was her secret to keep, just like the sketch of him she'd drawn from memory, tucked away in her private sketchbook, a reminder of the night that had given her the greatest gift of her life. Chapter 4. The Chance Encounter. Darren Emerson adjusted his tie as he walked through the elementary school's brightly decorated hallways. At 39, he still cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, though the past decade had left subtle marks. a few strands of silver at his temples, slight creases around his eyes from years of board meetings and business decisions. "Mr. Emerson, we're so honored you could attend our annual art exhibition," Principal Matthews gushed, leading him through the crowded corridor. "Your foundation's support of arts education has been invaluable." Darren nodded politely, though his mind wandered. 10 years of philanthropic work had brought him to countless events like this, yet something felt different tonight. An inexplicable restlessness had been gnawing at him all day. "The children's work is displayed in the gymnasium," the principal continued. "We have some extraordinary young talents this year." The gymnasium had been transformed into an impressive gallery space. Artwork lined the walls, each piece carefully mounted and labeled. Parents and community members milled about, their voices creating a gentle hum of appreciation and pride. "Perhaps we could start with our most promising students section," Principal Matthews suggested, but Darren had already drifted away, drawn to a collection of paintings in the far corner. The first piece caught his breath in his throat. It was a watercolor of a dragon, but unlike any dragon he'd seen before. Instead of breathing fire, it seemed to be breathing light. Warm, protective light that wrapped around a small figure below. The technique was remarkable for such a young artist, but it was something else that held him transfixed. The way the light was rendered reminded him of someone, of quiet conversations about art and dreams in a hotel room 10 years ago. "Extraordinary piece, isn't it?" An art teacher had appeared beside him. "One of our most talented students created that series. He calls it Guardians of Dreams." Darren moved to the next painting, his heart beating faster. This one showed a woman painting at an easel, her dark hair falling forward as she worked. Though her face wasn't clearly visible, something about her pose, the curve of her neck. "The artist seems to have a strong connection to light and protection," Darren managed, his voice surprisingly steady. "Oh yes, Abraham has a unique perspective for someone so young. His mother's an artist too, a graphic designer. You can see her influence in his work." Abraham. The name echoed in Darren's mind as he turned to the final piece in the series. This one showed a boy sitting at a window, looking out at a night sky filled with stars. The boy's reflection was visible in the window glass, and Darren's world tilted on its axis. That smile, his smile, the same crooked upturn that had charmed business partners and graced countless magazine covers. And there, in the corner of the boy's cheek, a dimple, his dimple. With trembling fingers, Darren leaned closer to read the placard. "Watching for Dragon's artist, Abraham Judith, age 9. Judith. The surname slammed into him like a physical blow. Cinnamon Judith, the woman he'd never quite been able to forget, who disappeared without a trace 10 years ago. 9 years old, he whispered, mental calculations spinning. The timing. It matched perfectly, too perfectly to be coincidence. "Would you like to meet the artist?" The teacher beamed. "He's here tonight with his mother. They're probably by the refreshment table. Abraham mentioned something about promised ice cream after the show." Darren's legs carried him through the crowd before he'd made a conscious decision to move. The world seemed to blur around him, faces and voices fading into background noise as he approached the refreshment area. And there they were. Cinnamon looked exactly as he remembered, yet somehow more beautiful. Her dark hair was shorter now, falling just past her shoulders, and she wore a simple but elegant black dress. She was crouched down, wiping what appeared to be ice cream from a young boy's chin with the practiced ease of a mother. "Mom, I'm not a baby," the boy protested, though his laugh held no real annoyance. "I can clean my own face." "Oh, really?" Cinnamon teased. "Is that why you still have chocolate on your nose?" The boy, Abraham, scrunched his nose in a gesture so familiar that Darren had to grip a nearby table for support. He'd seen that exact expression in childhood photos of himself. Taking a deep breath, Darren stepped forward. "That's a beautiful painting series," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the short distance. Cinnamon froze. Even from behind, Darren could see the sudden tension in her shoulders. She stood slowly, turning to face him with wide eyes. "The dragon one is my favorite," Darren continued, his eyes fixed on Abraham. "I used to love dragons when I was your age. Still do, actually." Abraham's face lit up. "Really? Mum says dragons are just pretend, but I think maybe they're real, just invisible. That's why I painted them with light instead of fire." "Abraham," Cinnamon's voice was barely a whisper. "What an interesting perspective," Darren said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "How old are you, young man?" The boy stood straighter, pride evident in his bearing. 9. Almost 10 in 3 months. 9 years and 9 months since that night at the Grand Metropolitan. The math was undeniable. "That's wonderful," Darren managed, though his heart was thundering in his chest. "You have an extraordinary talent." He turned to Cinnamon, whose face had gone pale. "Miss Judith, might I have a word?" "Abraham, sweetheart." Cinnamon's voice was remarkably controlled. "Could you please go show Grandma your dragon painting? She hasn't seen it properly yet." "But, Mom—" "Please, baby, just for a few minutes." They watched in silence as Abraham walked away, his small figure weaving through the crowd toward an elderly woman who could only be Cinnamon's mother, the woman whose illness had brought them together that fateful night. When they were alone, Cinnamon spoke first. "Darren, Is he mine?" The words came out more sharply than he'd intended. Tears welled in Cinnamon's eyes. "Yes." 1 word, 3 letters. A decade of secrets unraveled. "Why?" The question held 10 years of loss, of wondering, of missing something he hadn't even known existed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You had already done so much," Cinnamon's voice cracked. "The medical bills, the treatments. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone thinking I was trying to trap you, to take advantage." "Take advantage?" Darren's laugh was hollow. "I've spent 10 years thinking about you, wondering why you disappeared. I tried to find you, did you know that? But you'd moved, changed your number." "I had to protect him," she whispered. From the whispers, the judgment, the weight of being the illegitimate child of Darren Emerson. "He's my son." The words tasted strange on his tongue, wonderful and terrible at once. "I had a right to know him." "Yes," Cinnamon admitted, a tear sliding down her cheek. "You did. But I had to make a choice, and I chose to give him a normal life, filled with love and art and no father," Darren finished, his voice rough with emotion. Across the room, Abraham was gesturing animatedly to his grandmother, explaining something about his painting. His crooked smile flashed as he laughed, and Darren felt the loss of every moment he'd missed like physical pain. "He's incredible," he said softly. "His art, it's beyond his years." "He gets that from both of us," Cinnamon replied, then bit her lip as if she'd said too much. Darren turned back to her, his eyes intense. "I want to know him, Cinnamon. I want to be part of his life." "It's not that simple." "It is," he interrupted. "He's my son. Nothing else matters." Before Cinnamon could respond, Abraham bounded back to them, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, Grandma says my dragons are the best she's ever seen, even better than the ones in my books." Darren watched as Cinnamon's face transformed with love for their son, and in that moment he made a silent vow. He would know this boy, would make up for every lost moment, every missed milestone, whatever it took. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Cinnamon said, running her fingers through Abraham's dark hair, Darren's hair. As Abraham launched into a detailed explanation of his artistic process, Darren caught Cinnamon's eye over their son's head. The message in his gaze was clear. This isn't over. He couldn't have known then how complicated things would become, how fierce the battles ahead would be. But standing there, watching his son's animated face as he described his dragons, Darren knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a memory surfaced. Himself, at 9 years old, drawing dragons in the margins of his schoolbooks, dreaming of magic and protection and light. Now here was his son, bringing those same dreams to life in vibrant colors and bold strokes, carrying forward a legacy he hadn't even known was his to inherit. Chapter 5. The Question. The school gymnasium seemed to shrink around them, the chattering crowd fading to white noise as Darren stood before his son. Abraham's eyes, his eyes, sparkled with enthusiasm as he continued explaining his artwork, unaware of the thunderstorm brewing in the adults' hearts. "I used different shades of blue for the dragon's scales," Abraham was saying, pointing to the painting. "See how they catch the light? Mom taught me about layering colors to make them look more real." Darren's throat tightened. Even the boy's passionate attention to detail mirrored his own. "The technique is remarkable," he managed, his voice surprisingly steady. "You must practice a lot." "Every day," Abraham beamed. "Mom converted our garage into a studio. She says art is like breathing. You have to do it every day to live." Cinnamon's sharp intake of breath drew Darren's attention. She stood rigid beside them, her hands clasped tightly together, watching their interaction with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Your mother is very wise," Darren said softly, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "How old are you, young man?" The question hung in the air like a suspended note, though he already knew the answer, needed to hear it from his son's lips. 9, Abraham answered proudly, "but I'll be 10 in 3 months. Mom says I'm growing too fast, but I can't wait to be older. There's this advanced art program at the community center that only takes kids 10 and up. 9 years and 3 months. The math burned through Darren's mind like wildfire. He'd been in countless high-stakes business negotiations, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, for the way his heart seemed to squeeze in his chest as he looked at this boy, his boy. "That's a wonderful age," Darren said, fighting to keep his voice level. "Old enough to create such beautiful art, but still young enough to believe in dragons." Abraham's face lit up. "Do you like dragons too? Most grown-ups think they're silly." "I love dragons," Darren replied, remembering the drawer full of dragon sketches in his childhood bedroom, drawings his mother had saved until the day she died. "When I was your age, I used to imagine them flying between the city buildings, protecting people." "Mom!" Abraham exclaimed, tugging at Cinnamon's sleeve. "He understands about the protecting dragons. That's what I've been trying to tell you." Cinnamon's eyes met Darren's over their son's head, and in that moment, he saw all the years they'd lost, all the moments he'd missed, first steps, first words, first drawings, gone forever. "Abraham, sweetheart," Cinnamon's voice was gentle but firm, "it's getting late, and you have school tomorrow." "But, Mom—" "Your mother's right," Darren interrupted, though every fiber of his being screamed against letting them leave. "School is important, but perhaps we could talk more about art another time." The hope in Abraham's eyes was like a physical blow. "Really? Could we?" Before Cinnamon could respond, Principal Matthews approached their group. "Mr. Emerson, the board members are asking for you. They're eager to discuss the Foundation's future involvement with our arts program." Darren wanted to scream, to tell them all to go away, to give him more time with the son he'd just discovered. Instead, he forced a professional smile. "Of course. Just a moment, please." He turned back to Abraham, drinking in every detail of his son's face. "Your dragons are extraordinary," he said softly. "Never stop believing in them." As Cinnamon hurried Abraham toward the exit, Darren caught her arm gently. "We need to talk," he whispered. "Tomorrow, please." She hesitated, then nodded once, scribbling her number on a nearby program. "Call me in the morning." Darren watched them leave, his son's excited chatter about dragons fading into the crowd noise. The program with Cinnamon's number felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. "Mr. Emerson," Principal Matthews prompted. "Just one moment," he said, pulling out his phone. He typed Cinnamon's number in with trembling fingers, then sent a single text, "He has my smile." The response came seconds later. "I know." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Darren shook hands, made appropriate comments about arts funding, smiled at all the right moments. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying every second of his interaction with Abraham, cataloguing their similarities. The boy had his height for his age, his dark hair, his way of gesturing when excited. But he had Cinnamon's artistic soul, her gentle spirit, the perfect blend of them both. Later that night, in his penthouse apartment, Darren sat in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of his success. Awards lined the walls, testament to his business acumen and philanthropic work. But tonight, they seemed meaningless compared to the simple school art exhibition program that held Cinnamon's number. He opened his laptop, typing "Abraham Judith" into the search bar. Nothing significant appeared. He was still too young to have much of an online presence. But there, on the school's website, was a mention of his recent art competition victories. Darren's cursor hovered over the Images tab, his heart pounding. Click! And there was his son, smaller in these older photos, but always with that same crooked smile, always with art supplies in hand or paintings behind him. A decade of memories he should have been part of, reduced to a handful of digital fragments. He picked up his phone again, reading Cinnamon's two-word response over and over. "I know." Such simple words to acknowledge something so monumental. Tomorrow they would talk. Tomorrow he would demand answers, explanations, time with his son. Tomorrow he would begin the fight to be part of Abraham's life. But tonight, alone in his office, Darren Emerson, successful businessman, philanthropist, and newly discovered father, did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up a pen and began to draw a dragon. The creature took shape under his unpracticed hand, not nearly as skilled as Abraham's work, but filled with the same protective spirit. He drew until the sun began to rise, filling page after page with the dragons of his childhood, imagining his son doing the same in his converted garage studio. When his assistant arrived at 7 a.m., she found him still at his desk, surrounded by drawings and wearing yesterday's suit. "Clear my schedule," he said, not looking up from the last dragon he was sketching. "All of it, for the next week at least." "But sir, the board meeting—" "Everything," he insisted, finally raising his eyes. "Some things are more important than business." As she hurried away, clearly confused, Darren picked up his phone. It was early, but he couldn't wait any longer. His finger hovered over Cinnamon's number as the weight of the question he needed to ask pressed down on him. 9 years. He had missed 9 years of his son's life. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Darren." Her voice was soft, resigned. "I need to know everything," he said without preamble. "Every detail, every moment, every reason why I'm just meeting my son now." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like eternity before Cinnamon finally spoke. "Come to the house," she said quietly. "Abraham will be at school. We have a lot to talk about." As he wrote down the address she provided, Darren looked at the dragons scattered across his desk, his past and his son's present, intertwined in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I'll be there in an hour," he promised, already reaching for his car keys. The question that had started it all, "How old are you, young man?" had opened a door that could never be closed again. Now it was time to walk through it. whatever lay on the other side. Chapter 6. Confrontation. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cinnamon's modest front yard as Darren's luxury car pulled up to the curb. He sat for a moment, taking in the small but well-kept house with its cheerful flower boxes and wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. A child's bicycle, Abraham's bicycle, lay on its side near the porch steps. The sight of it nearly undid him. Cinnamon opened the door before he could knock, her face pale but composed. She wore simple jeans and a paint-stained sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, so different from the elegant dress of last night's exhibition. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. The house was modest but warm, filled with art and light. Abraham's presence was everywhere, drawings pinned to walls, a backpack thrown carelessly on a chair, a half-finished bowl of cereal still on the kitchen table. "I just sent him to school," Cinnamon explained, following Darren's gaze. He was talking about you all morning, about the man who understands dragons." Darren's jaw tightened. "Does he have any idea who I really am?" "No." The word hung between them like a sword. "Why?" The question exploded from him with such force that Cinnamon flinched. "Why didn't you tell me? I had a right to know my son exists." "You were kind to a desperate woman." Cinnamon's voice cracked slightly. "I refuse to take advantage of that kindness." "Advantage?" Darren laughed bitterly. "Is that what you think this was about? Cinnamon, I spent months looking for you after you disappeared. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, said something to drive you away." She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture. The treatment was working. Mom was getting better. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone thinking I was trying to trap you, to exploit your generosity, so instead you decided to punish me, to deny me my own child. His voice rose with each word. "Punish you?" Now it was Cinnamon's turn to laugh, though the sound held no humor. "You want to talk about punishment? Try being the woman who had to make an impossible choice to save her mother's life. Try carrying that weight, that judgment, that whispered shame." "What shame? I would have taken care of you both." "Exactly." She whirled to face him, tears shining in her eyes. The great Darren Emerson, swooping in to rescue the poor, desperate girl who got herself pregnant. Do you have any idea what that would have done to Abraham, growing up as the illegitimate son of a wealthy man who paid off his mother? Darren recoiled as if she'd slapped him. "Is that really what you think of me? After everything?" "No," she whispered, deflating slightly. "No, that's not. You were kind, Darren, so kind, but kindness isn't always enough." He moved closer, his voice intense. "Show me." "What?" "Show me his life, everything I've missed, please." Cinnamon hesitated, then led him down a hallway lined with framed artwork. Abraham's progression from childish scribbles to increasingly sophisticated pieces. She stopped at each one, explaining the stories behind them. This was his first real drawing at 3. He insisted it was a dragon, though it looked more like a squiggly mess. This one he did when he was 5, after I explained about his grandmother's illness and recovery. This series he created last year, about protecting dreams. They ended up in Abraham's converted garage studio. The space was filled with light and color, works in progress scattered across easels and tables. A familiar scent of paint and creativity brought Darren back to that night 10 years ago, when Cinnamon had spoken so passionately about her own art dreams. "He's incredible," Darren said softly, running his fingers over a half-finished canvas, "just like his mother." "He has your determination," Cinnamon replied. "When he sets his mind to something, nothing can stop him." "Why now?" Darren turned to face her. "You must have known this could happen, that I might see him somewhere, recognize myself in him." "I did." She sank onto a paint-splattered stool. "But by then we had built a life, a good life. I told myself that if it happened, it happened. That fate would decide." "Fate." His laugh was harsh. Fate didn't decide this, Cinnamon. You did. You chose to keep my son from me for 9 years. To protect him. From what? From having a father who would have moved heaven and earth to be part of his life. From having every opportunity, every advantage. From being a scandal. Her voice broke. From being whispered about, pointed at, judged before he could even understand why. From having his entire identity tied to being Darren Emerson's secret child instead of just Abraham, my beautiful, talented boy who believes in dragons and paints light instead of fire. Darren's anger deflated slightly as he looked around the studio again, seeing the evidence of a childhood filled with love and creativity. "You've done an amazing job with him," he admitted quietly, "but that doesn't change the fact that I missed everything. His first words, his first steps, his first drawing. I can never get those moments back." "I know." Tears slid down Cinnamon's cheeks. "And part of me will always regret that, but I had to choose between protecting my child and everything else. And now..." Darren's voice was rough with emotion. "What choice will you make now that I know?" Before she could answer, they heard the front door open. "Mom, I forgot my math homework." They froze, staring at each other in panic. Abraham's footsteps approached the studio. "Mom, are you in the..." He stopped in the doorway, his eyes widening. "Mr. Dragonman, you're here!" The joy in his voice, the pure innocence of his surprise, hit them both like a physical blow. Here was their son, unknowingly standing between his parents for the first time in his life. I was just admiring your studio," Darren managed, his heart racing. "Your mother was kind enough to show me your work." "Really?" Abraham bounded in, excitement radiating from him. "Do you want to see my new dragon? I started it this morning before school. Mom, can I skip math just this once? Please." Cinnamon wiped her tears quickly, forcing a smile. "Nice try, mister, but you know the rules. School comes first, art second." "But Mom..." "Your mother's right," Darren said, though every fibre of his being wanted to say yes, to spend every possible moment with his son. Education is important, even for artists. Abraham's shoulders slumped slightly. "Okay. But will you come back to see the finished dragon?" Darren looked at Cinnamon, the question clear in his eyes. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "I'd love to," he said softly. "If that's all right with your mother." "Yes!" Abraham pumped his fist in the air. "Mom, where's my math homework?" "Kitchen table, where you left it," Cinnamon answered, her voice remarkably steady. They watched as Abraham raced back to the house, his footsteps thundering through their silence. "We need to tell him," Darren said quietly once their son was out of earshot. "He deserves to know the truth." "I know." Cinnamon's voice was barely a whisper. "But we have to do it right. He's sensitive, Darren. Creative souls feel things deeply. Just like his mother." The words came out softer than he intended. Their eyes met, a decade of unspoken words passing between them. In that moment they were no longer the desperate woman and her generous benefactor, no longer the secret mother and the deceived father. They were simply two people who had created something extraordinary together. A boy who painted dragons and believed in magic. "We'll figure this out," Darren said finally. "For Abraham's sake, we have to." Cinnamon nodded, wiping away fresh tears. "Yes, for Abraham." As if on cue, their son's voice carried from the house. "Found it! Bye, Mom. Bye, Mr. Dragonman." The front door slammed, and they were alone again with their secrets, their regrets, and the weight of decisions yet to come. The morning sun continued to stream through the studio windows, illuminating the unfinished dragon on Abraham's easel, a creature of light and shadow, just like the truth they would soon have to reveal. Chapter 7. Legal Battles. The law office of Morrison and Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor of a gleaming downtown tower. Cinnamon sat rigidly in the conference room's leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she read through Darren's custody petition for the third time. "He's asking for joint custody," her lawyer Maria Santos explained gently. 3 days a week, alternating holidays, shared decision-making rights for education and medical care. "He can't just walk in after 9 years and demand half my son's life." Cinnamon's voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. "Abraham barely knows him." "The court will take that into consideration," Maria assured her. "But Mr. Emerson has resources, Cinnamon, significant resources, and he's already filed for expedited DNA testing." Across town, in an equally imposing office building, Darren was having his own legal consultation. "She deliberately concealed your child from you for 9 years, Jonathan Blake," his family law attorney stated firmly. "That's parental alienation. We can use that." Darren stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows, remembering Abraham's excited face in his art studio. "I don't want to destroy her, Jonathan. I just want to be part of my son's life." "Then she should have thought of that before she disappeared with your child," Jonathan replied, shuffling through papers. "The DNA results came back this morning. 99.99% probability of paternity. With this and your financial resources, we can push for immediate temporary custody while we fight for permanent arrangements." The first court hearing was set for a Wednesday morning. Abraham was in school, blissfully unaware that his parents were fighting over him in a sterile courtroom downtown. "Your Honor," Jonathan Blake argued smoothly, "my client has been denied his fundamental right to parent his child. Miss Judith unilaterally decided to deprive both father and son of their relationship. We're asking the court to remedy this injustice immediately." Maria Santos stood, her voice steady. "Miss Judith made decisions to protect her child from scandal and social stigma. She's created a stable, nurturing environment where Abraham has thrived. Disrupting that environment now would be detrimental to his well-being." The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, looked between them. "Has anyone bothered to ask what Abraham wants?" The question hung heavy in the air. That evening, Cinnamon found Abraham in his studio, working on his latest dragon painting. The colors were darker than usual, heavy with shadows. "That's different from your usual style, sweetheart," she observed carefully. Abraham's brush stilled. "I had a weird dream last night. The dragons weren't protecting anymore. They were fighting each other." Cinnamon's heart clenched. Even in his art, her son was picking up on the tension surrounding him. "Mom?" His voice was small. "Why does Mr. Dragon Man keep coming to our house when I'm at school?" The question she'd been dreading. "Abraham, Tommy at school says he saw his picture in a magazine, says he's really rich and important. Is that why he's interested in my art? Because he feels sorry for us?" "No, baby." Cinnamon knelt beside him, her heart breaking. "It's much more complicated than that." Before she could continue, her phone buzzed. Another email from her lawyer. The court had granted Darren's request for temporary visitation rights while the case proceeded. The next few weeks became a blur of legal documents, court appearances, and watching Abraham's bright spirit slowly dim. The media had gotten wind of the story. Wealthy businessman discovers secret artistic son, and reporters had started camping outside their house. "But I don't want to go!" Abraham shouted one Friday afternoon, when Darren was due to pick him up for his first court-mandated visit. "I want to stay and finish my painting." "Sweetheart, please," Cinnamon pleaded, seeing Darren's expensive car pulling up outside. "Mr. Emerson just wants to spend some time with you." "Why? He never cared before." Abraham's eyes filled with tears. "Is it because my art got in the newspaper? Is that why he noticed me?" The front door opened. They'd given Darren a key as part of the temporary arrangement. He stood awkwardly in the hallway, hearing every word. "I did care," Darren said quietly, making both Cinnamon and Abraham jump. I cared before I even knew you existed. That doesn't make sense, Abraham said, his artist's soul demanding truth. Mom, what's really going on? Cinnamon and Darren's eyes met over their son's head. This wasn't how they'd planned to tell him, but the moment had chosen itself. Sit down, sweetheart, Cinnamon said softly. There's something we need to tell you. But before they could begin, Abraham backed away from them both. No, I don't want to hear it. Everything was perfect before he came. We were happy. He ran to his studio, slamming the door behind him. Through the window they could see him attack a canvas with angry strokes of black paint, covering one of his light-filled dragons in darkness. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Cinnamon whispered, tears streaming down her face. He's hurting Darren. Our legal battle is hurting him. Then let's stop it, Darren replied, his voice rough with emotion. Let's find another way. But it wasn't that simple. The courts had their process, the lawyers their strategies. Joint custody versus sole custody, visitation schedules, holiday arrangements. Every detail of Abraham's life became a point of contention to be argued by strangers in business suits. Abraham's art teacher called one afternoon, concerned. His work has changed dramatically, she explained to Cinnamon. The light he used to paint with, it's gone. Everything is shadows now. That night, Cinnamon found Abraham sitting in his studio, staring at his wall of paintings. They don't make sense anymore, he said without turning around. The dragons, they were supposed to protect people, but they can't even protect themselves. The next day she called Darren. We need to meet. No lawyers, no courts, just us. They met at a quiet cafe, far from both their homes. Cinnamon brought Abraham's latest paintings, dark, conflicted pieces that broke both their hearts. Look what we're doing to him, she said quietly. He's 9 years old, Darren. 9 years old, and already learning that love comes with conditions and courts and contracts. Darren stared at the paintings, seeing his son's pain expressed in every angry brushstroke. I just wanted to be his father, he whispered. How did it turn into this? Because we're both so afraid of losing him that we're forgetting to see what we're doing to him. Cinnamon pulled out another painting, Abraham's latest self-portrait. In it, he stood between two dragon-like shadows, neither light nor dark, caught in an endless tug-of-war. We need to stop, Darren said finally. All of it. The courts, the custody battle. We need to find another way. But how? The process has already started. The lawyers... Forget the lawyers, Darren interrupted. This isn't about legal rights anymore. It's about our son. Our son who believes in dragons and paints with light, or used to before we started tearing his world apart. As if to underscore his point, Cinnamon's phone buzzed with a text from Abraham's grandmother. He's crying in his studio again, says he doesn't want to paint anymore. They looked at each other, years of hurt and mistrust warring with their shared love for their child. Okay, Cinnamon said finally. Okay, no more courts, no more lawyers. We figure this out ourselves for Abraham's sake. For Abraham, Darren agreed. And for the first time since this battle began, they were truly united in purpose. Neither of them could have known then that this moment of truce would lead to something even more challenging, learning to be parents together, to put aside their past for the sake of their son's future. But as they sat in that quiet cafe, surrounded by the evidence of their child's pain, they made their choice. The dragons in Abraham's art might be shrouded in shadows now, but perhaps, if they could learn to work together, they could help him find his light again. Chapter 8. Understanding the child psychologist's office was painted in soothing blues and greens, with comfortable furniture sized for both adults and children. Dr. Sarah Chen studied the artwork before her, a series of Abraham's paintings from the past few months, arranged chronologically. The progression was striking, from light-filled dragons of protection to increasingly darker, conflicted pieces. This is what we call emotional expression through art, she explained to Darren and Cinnamon, who sat stiffly on opposite ends of the couch. Abraham is processing his feelings the way he knows best, through his paintings. He used to love painting, Cinnamon whispered, touching one of the earlier pieces. Now he barely enters his studio. Because his safe space has become associated with conflict, Dr. Chen said gently. From what you've both told me, Abraham's studio was his sanctuary. Now it's where he first started noticing the tension between you two, where he began to sense that something was wrong. Darren leaned forward, his face lined with worry. How do we fix this? How do we help him? First, you need to understand something crucial, Dr. Chen replied, laying out Abraham's most recent painting, a self-portrait showing him trapped between two shadowy figures. Abraham isn't just dealing with learning about his father. He's dealing with the fear that everything he thought he knew about his life might be uncertain. The words hit both parents like a physical blow. Later that afternoon, they sat in the hospital cafeteria, neither touching their coffee. They'd just watched Abraham meet with Dr. Chen alone, seen how their normally vibrant son seemed smaller somehow, more subdued. I never wanted this, Darren said quietly. To cause him pain, it's the last thing I ever intended. I know. Cinnamon's voice was equally soft. I see it now. You just wanted to be his father, and you were just trying to protect him. Darren met her eyes across the table. We've both been so focused on what we want, what we think is right, that we forgot to see what it was doing to him, Cinnamon finished. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Chen approaching with Abraham. Their son's eyes were red-rimmed, but there was something lighter about his bearing. Abraham has something he'd like to share with you both, Dr. Chen said, giving the boy an encouraging smile. Abraham pulled a folded paper from his pocket, carefully smoothing it out on the table. It was a new drawing, simple, done with the cafeteria crayons Dr. Chen kept in her office. In it, 3 figures stood together, a woman with long dark hair, a tall man in a suit, and between them, a smaller figure holding what looked like a paintbrush. Doctor, Chen asked me to draw my biggest wish, Abraham explained, his voice small but steady. This is it, but I'm scared it's impossible. Why impossible, sweetheart? Cinnamon asked, her heart breaking. Because... Abraham's lower lip trembled. Because grown-ups can't fix broken things. Once they break something, it stays broken, like Tommy's family after his parents fought in court. Darren moved before he could think, kneeling beside his son's chair. Abraham, look at me. He waited until those familiar eyes, his eyes, met his. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big mistakes, but that doesn't mean we can't try to fix them. But you're fighting because of me, Abraham whispered. Because I exist. No! Both parents spoke simultaneously. Cinnamon joined them, creating a small circle around Abraham's drawing. We're fighting because we both love you so much that we forgot the most important thing, what you need. And what do you need, Abraham? Dr. Chen prompted gently. Abraham looked down at his drawing, then up at both his parents. I need the fighting to stop. I need to be able to paint my dragons again, with light instead of shadows. I need... His voice cracked. I need both of you, but not like this. The simplicity of his words, the pure truth of them, seemed to shift something in the atmosphere. Darren and Cinnamon looked at each other over their son's head, really looked, for the first time since the court battles began. Then that's what you'll have, Darren said firmly. No more courts, no more lawyers. We'll figure this out another way. Together, Cinnamon added, touching Abraham's hand. As a family, whatever that looks like. Dr. Chen smiled approvingly. That's a wonderful start, but it will take work, real work, from all of you. Abraham needs to see that his parents can communicate, can put his needs first, can build something new from the pieces of what was broken. Over the next few weeks, they began the delicate process of reconstruction. The lawyers were dismissed, the court petitions withdrawn. Instead, they started family therapy sessions, learning to navigate their unique situation. Darren's first real breakthrough came during an art therapy session. Dr. Chen had asked them each to paint their vision of family. Abraham watched in amazement as his father, in his expensive suit, rolled up his sleeves and attempted to paint a dragon. "It's awful," Darren laughed, looking at his clumsy attempt. "Nothing like your beautiful work." "I could teach you," Abraham offered hesitantly, "about mixing colors and making light." The hope in his son's voice made Darren's heart swell. "I'd love that." Cinnamon, working on her own painting nearby, felt tears prick her eyes at the exchange. For the first time she could see it, the possibility of them all fitting together, not in the conventional way she'd once dreamed of, but in their own unique pattern. They established new routines. Darren would come over 3 evenings a week, not because a court ordered it, but because Abraham asked for it. They would paint together in the studio, father and son, while Cinnamon worked on her graphic design projects nearby. Sometimes they would all have dinner together, learning to navigate the awkward pauses and building something like comfort. One evening, Abraham revealed his first new dragon painting since the conflict began. The creature was neither light nor shadow, but a complex blend of both, its scales reflecting all the colors of dawn. "It's different from your old ones," Cinnamon observed. Abraham nodded thoughtfully. "The old ones were about protecting people from bad things. This one is about how sometimes things can be hard and good at the same time, like our family." Darren and Cinnamon exchanged glances, seeing in their son's art the wisdom they had struggled so hard to find. "Dr. Chen says that's called growth," Abraham continued, adding final touches to his dragon. "When you learn that things don't have to be perfect to be right." That night, after Abraham had gone to bed, Darren and Cinnamon sat in the studio, surrounded by the evolution of their son's art, from simple joy to pain to this new, deeper understanding. "We almost lost this," Cinnamon said softly, gesturing to the latest painting. "His gift, his spirit. We almost crushed it with our fighting." "But we didn't," Darren replied. "We learned. We're still learning." "Like the dragons," she smiled slightly, "moving from light versus shadow to understanding that both have their place." As if to underscore her words, the setting sun streamed through the studio windows, casting both light and shadow across Abraham's new painting, making the dragon seem to move, to breathe, to live in both worlds at once. They had a long way to go, many more therapy sessions and awkward moments ahead. But something fundamental had shifted. They had finally understood that being parents wasn't about winning or losing, about rights or revenge. It was about creating a space where their child could grow, could paint his dragons in whatever colors he chose, could believe in both light and shadow, and most importantly, could believe in the power of love to heal what was broken. Chapter 9. The Bridge. The Community Arts Center buzzed with excitement as parents and children filed in for the weekend workshop. Abraham stood nervously by his easel, watching as other families took their places. This was his first time teaching alongside his regular art teacher, Ms. Reynolds, and both his parents had promised to attend. "They'll both come, right?" he asked Cinnamon for the 3rd time that morning, fidgeting with his paint-stained apron. "Yes, sweetheart." She straightened his collar with practiced ease. "Your father just texted. He's parking now." The word father still felt new on her tongue, though they'd been working on their new family dynamic for several months now. As if summoned by their conversation, Darren appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Sorry, I'm almost late, he said, joining them. Board meeting ran long, but I wouldn't miss this for anything. Abraham's face lit up. I saved spots for both of you, next to each other, is that okay? Cinnamon and Darren exchanged glances, seeing the hope in their son's eyes. Of course it's okay, they said almost in unison, then shared a small smile at the synchronicity. The workshop theme was family portraits in mixed media, and Abraham had volunteered to demonstrate his technique for blending traditional paint with digital elements, a skill he'd developed combining his mother's graphic design influence with his own artistic style. Remember, he explained to the group, his initial nervousness fading as he focused on art. A family portrait doesn't have to look like a regular photograph. It can show how your family feels. Darren watched with pride as Abraham demonstrated his technique, noting how his son's hands moved with the same precise confidence he himself used in business presentations. Beside him, Cinnamon quietly took photos for Abraham's portfolio. He's incredible, Darren whispered to her. You did such an amazing job with him. We're both doing a good job now, she replied softly. That's what matters. As the families worked on their portraits, Abraham moved around the room, offering guidance. He stopped at his parents' easels, curious to see their work. Cinnamon's piece showed 3 intertwined trees, their branches creating a natural archway. Darren had attempted a more literal portrait, but had incorporated some of Abraham's signature dragon elements in the background. "Mom, that's beautiful!" Abraham exclaimed, "the way the trees support each other. And Dad, you remembered everything I taught you about creating texture in the scales." The pride in his voice when he said Dad made Darren's heart swell. It had taken time and patience, but they'd finally reached the point where Abraham could use the word naturally. After the workshop, as they helped clean up, Ms. Reynolds pulled them aside. "The Children's Art Exhibition in Capital City has accepted Abraham's latest series," she announced. "It's a huge honor. They rarely take artists under 12. Abraham's eyes went wide. "Really? My Dragon series?" "The new ones," Ms. Reynolds nodded, "about family and understanding." They were very impressed. Can you both come?" Abraham looked between his parents. "It's 3 hours away, but I'll clear my schedule," Darren said immediately. "Me too," Cinnamon added. "We wouldn't miss it." Later that evening, they celebrated with dinner at Abraham's favorite pizza place. The boy chatted excitedly about his exhibition pieces, while his parents listened attentively, occasionally catching each other's eyes with shared pride. "And my newest painting," Abraham was saying, "shows how dragons can work together even if they're different types, like how Dad's good at business things and Mom's good at art things, but you both help me in different ways." Cinnamon reached over to wipe tomato sauce from his chin, a habitual gesture. "Speaking of help, have you finished your math homework for Monday?" Abraham's expression turned guilty. "Almost." "Tell you what," Darren offered. "If you finish it tomorrow morning, we can spend the afternoon working on your exhibition pieces. Deal?" "Deal!" Abraham beamed. "Can we use the new metallic paints you got me?" As they walked to their cars afterward, Abraham running ahead to look at a street performer, Cinnamon touched Darren's arm lightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For being patient. For learning to work with me instead of against me. For loving him enough to do this right." Darren watched their son, who was now explaining something about art technique to the bemused street musician. "Thank you for giving me the chance to try." The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Darren would come over 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to help with homework or art projects. They attended parent-teacher conferences together, sat side by side at Abraham's school performances, and gradually learned to navigate co-parenting without the tension that had marked their earlier attempts. One Saturday morning, as Abraham worked on his exhibition pieces, He called both parents into his studio. "I want to show you something," he said, unveiling his latest painting. "It's called Building Bridges." The canvas showed two distant cliffs connected by a bridge made entirely of dragons, each creature linking with the next to create a path across the divide. The dragons were painted in both light and shadow, but where they touched, their scales created beautiful patterns of merged colors. "See?" Abraham explained, pointing to different elements. "This dragon here represents Dad. See how it's strong and protective? And this one is Mom. Look how it creates beautiful things with its tail. And this smaller one in the middle, that's me. I'm the keystone." "The what?" Darren asked. "The keystone," Abraham repeated. "We learned about it in science. It's the stone in the middle of an arch that holds everything together. Without it, the bridge would fall. But also," he added thoughtfully, "without the other stones supporting it, the keystone wouldn't have anywhere to rest." Cinnamon and Darren stood speechless, moved by their son's profound understanding of their family dynamic. "Do you think it's good enough for the exhibition?" Abraham asked anxiously. "It's perfect," Cinnamon assured him, her voice thick with emotion. "More than perfect," Darren agreed. "It's truth." That evening, after Abraham had gone to bed, his parents sat in the studio, looking at the painting in the soft lamplight. "He sees us so clearly," Cinnamon mused. "All of us, exactly as we are. And loves us anyway," Darren added with a slight smile. "Maybe even because of it." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had gradually replaced their angry words and legal threats. The bridge in Abraham's painting seemed to glow softly, a testament to their journey from adversaries to partners in raising their extraordinary son. "We're really doing this," Cinnamon said quietly, "building something new." "One dragon at a time," Darren agreed, and they shared a smile at using their son's metaphor. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. In his room, Abraham slept peacefully, surrounded by his art, secure in the knowledge that his bridge was strong and getting stronger every day. The dragons of his imagination had evolved from simple protectors to complex beings capable of building connections, just as his parents had evolved from antagonists to allies, bound together by their love for their child and their growing respect for each other. They were building their bridge, stone by stone, dragon by dragon, day by day. And at its center, their beautiful boy continued to shine, the keystone that made everything else possible. Chapter 10. The Storm. The Emerson family estate sprawled across 5 manicured acres, its Georgian architecture a testament to old money and older traditions. Darren stood in his father's study, where generations of Emerson men had made decisions that shaped both family and fortune. The evening light filtered through leaded glass windows, casting long shadows across the Persian carpet. "This is unacceptable." Richard Emerson's voice cut through the silence like a steel blade. "An illegitimate child? And now you're playing happy families with his mother." "Don't call him that." Darren's voice was low but firm. "Abraham is my son." "A son born from what? One night with a woman who needed money for her mother's medical bills?" Richard's face reddened. "Did it never occur to you that this might have been her plan all along?" "You don't know, Cinnamon," Darren shot back. "You've never even met her, or Abraham. And I don't intend to." Richard moved behind his massive mahogany desk, a position he'd always used to assert authority. "The board meeting is next week. We're announcing the merger with Hamilton Industries. Your position as CEO of the combined companies is guaranteed, assuming there are no complications." The implied threat hung heavy in the air. "What exactly are you saying, Father?" I'm saying that Hamilton Industries is a conservative family company. They won't take kindly to a CEO with a scandal, especially not one involving an illegitimate child and his gold-digging mother. Darren's hands clenched into fists. Abraham is 9 years old. He's talented, kind and sensitive. He's also your grandson. No, Richard's voice was ice. No grandson of mine comes with this kind of baggage. You have a choice to make, Darren. Your inheritance, your position, your future, or this arrangement you've created with these people. Across town, unaware of the storm brewing, Abraham was showing Cinnamon his latest work in their studio. The painting showed a dragon teaching its young to fly, the sky around them alive with possibility. "See, Mom." The baby dragon is scared at first, but the parent dragon believes in him. Abraham pointed to the subtle details he'd included, just like how Dad believes in me, even when I mess up the perspective in my drawings. Cinnamon's heart swelled at how naturally Abraham now used the word Dad. Their careful bridge building over the past months had created something precious, a family that might not look traditional, but was filled with love and understanding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Darren. "Need to talk. Important. Can I come over?" When Darren arrived an hour later, after Abraham had gone to bed, Cinnamon knew immediately something was wrong. His face was drawn, his usual confident bearing replaced by a tension she hadn't seen since their early legal battles. "What happened?" she asked, leading him to the kitchen where they'd shared so many family meals recently. Darren sank into a chair, looking oddly vulnerable in his expensive suit. "My father found out about Abraham, about everything. And he's threatening to disinherit me if I don't—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Cinnamon's blood ran cold. "If you don't what, Darren?" "Cut ties with both of you." The words seemed to physically pain him. "The family company is merging with Hamilton Industries. I'm supposed to become CEO of the combined corporation. But my father says they won't accept a CEO with an illegitimate child." "I see." Cinnamon's voice was carefully neutral. "And what did you tell him?" "I walked out." Darren ran a hand through his hair. "But it's not just about the inheritance or the CEO position. The Emerson Foundation funds dozens of charitable initiatives, including arts programs in schools like Abraham's. My father's threatening to cut all of it. He'd hurt innocent children to punish his own grandson." "You don't know my father. Family reputation is everything to him. He sees Abraham as a threat to that reputation." Cinnamon stood, moving to the studio window that overlooked their small garden. In the moonlight, she could see Abraham's bike leaning against the fence, his art supplies scattered on the patio table where they'd painted that afternoon. "Remember when we first started the custody battle?" she asked quietly. "I was so afraid of Abraham being hurt by scandal, by whispers about his origins. Now here it is, the very thing I feared, coming from your own family." Cinnamon ... Darren moved to stand beside her. "I won't abandon him, not for all the money in the world. But I need time to figure this out, to find a way to protect the Foundation's work while still being part of Abraham's life." A noise from the hallway made them both turn. Abraham stood in the doorway, his pajamas rumpled, his face pale in the dim light. "You're leaving." His voice was small, younger than his 9 years. "Because your family doesn't want me?" "Abraham!" Cinnamon started forward, but Darren was faster. He knelt before his son, taking the boy's trembling hands in his. Never. "Do you remember what I told you about dragons?" Abraham sniffed. "That they protect what they love?" "Exactly. And I love you, son. No amount of money or power could change that. But I heard you talking about reputation and scandal." Abraham's artist soul had always made him perceptive beyond his years. "I'm the scandal, aren't I? Because you and Mom weren't married, because it was just one night. Listen to me, Darren's voice was fierce with emotion. You are not a scandal. You're a miracle. The best thing I never knew I wanted until I found you. And if my family can't see that, then they're not the family I want to be part of. What about your company? Abraham asked. And the foundation that helps kids learn art? Darren looked up at Cinnamon, then back at their son. Sometimes protecting what you love means making hard choices. But I promise you this, whatever happens with the company or the foundation, I will always be your father. Always. Later that night, after they'd calmed Abraham and gotten him back to bed, Darren and Cinnamon sat in the studio, surrounded by their son's art. The dragons on the walls seemed to watch them, witnesses to another turning point in their unconventional family story. You know what you have to do, Cinnamon said softly. Darren nodded, his expression resolute. I'll resign tomorrow, before the board meeting, start my own company if I have to. It could get ugly. The media ... Let them talk. Darren picked up one of Abraham's recent sketches, a simple drawing of their Sunday brunch routine with all three of them laughing around the kitchen table. This is worth more than any corporate merger. He'll need you to be strong, Cinnamon warned. When the stories come out, when people at school start talking, we'll be strong together. Darren looked at her intently. All of us. That's what family means, right? Standing together against the storm? Cinnamon touched the sketch gently. Like dragons. Like dragons, Darren agreed, and in that moment, their son's artistic metaphor seemed perfectly apt. They were building something powerful and protective, something that could weather any storm, even if it meant facing down the combined might of the Emerson family fortune. As if on cue, Darren's phone buzzed with a message from his father. The board meets at 9 a.m. Make the right choice. Darren turned off his phone without replying. His choice was already made, had been made the moment he saw his own smile on a 9-year-old boy's face at a school art exhibition. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, resignation letters and press releases, family fallout and financial reorganization. But tonight, in this peaceful studio filled with dragons and dreams, Darren knew with absolute certainty that he was finally, truly, protecting what mattered most. Chapter 11. The Sacrifice. The morning sun crept through the studio windows, finding Darren still seated among Abraham's artwork. He had spent the night there after Cinnamon insisted he stay, knowing the weight of what lay ahead. His phone, silent since he'd turned it off, lay accusingly on the table beside a dragon sketch. When he finally powered it on, the screen erupted with notifications. 27 missed calls from his father, 15 from the board members, and dozens of messages demanding his presence at the 9 a.m. meeting. It was 7:30 now. The smell of coffee drew him to the kitchen, where he found Cinnamon already dressed for the day, her hair pulled back in her characteristic messy bun. She wordlessly handed him a steaming mug. Abraham's still sleeping, she said softly. He was up late, worried. I know. Darren's voice was rough from the sleepless night. I heard him pacing in his room. Are you ready for this? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Eleanor Hamilton, matriarch of Hamilton Industries and his father's closest ally in the merger. Mrs. Hamilton, he answered, stepping onto the small balcony. Darren, dear, her voice dripped with artificial sweetness, your father tells me you're having some family difficulties. That's one way to put it. Listen to me carefully, she continued. I've known you since you were in diapers. I've watched you grow into a brilliant businessman. Don't throw it all away for some indiscretion. Darren's grip tightened on the phone. My son is not an indiscretion. Of course not, dear. But surely there are ways to handle this quietly. Set up a trust fund, ensure the boy's education, but maintain appropriate distance. It's what's done in these situations. Through the glass doors, Darren could see Abraham emerging from his room, sleep-tousled and vulnerable in his oversized art shirt, a birthday gift from Darren just months ago. The boy's eyes found his father on the balcony, and a small smile lifted his face. "I apologize, Mrs. Hamilton, but I'll have to call you back. I need to have breakfast with my son." He ended the call before she could respond. The next hour passed in a bubble of domestic normalcy. Abraham insisted on making his specialty, slightly burned toast with too much butter, while Cinnamon packed his lunch for school. Darren sat at their small kitchen table, his suit jacket draped over a chair covered in paint splatters, and marveled at how right this felt compared to the cold grandeur of the Emerson estate. At 8:30, Cinnamon left to drive Abraham to school. The boy hugged Darren fiercely before leaving. "Dad," he whispered, "whatever happens today, I'm proud you're my father." Darren had to swallow hard before he could respond. "I'm prouder to be your son." Once they were gone, he changed into the spare shirt he kept at Cinnamon's for their family dinners, straightened his tie, and headed to Emerson Tower. The familiar drive felt different now, as if he were seeing everything through new eyes. The boardroom was packed when he arrived at 8:55. His father sat at the head of the table, flanked by Eleanor Hamilton and the other board members. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "Darren," Richard's voice was carefully controlled, "I trust you've come to your senses." Instead of taking his usual seat at his father's right hand, Darren remained standing. He placed a folder on the table, his resignation letter typed and printed in the early hours of the morning. "I have come to my senses," he said clearly. "That's why I'm here to resign as CEO of Emerson Industries." The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouted questions. Eleanor Hamilton looked like she'd swallowed something sour, and Richard Emerson's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "You fool!" Richard slammed his hand on the table. "You would throw away generations of work, billions in assets, for what? A bastard child and his gold-digging mother?" The word bastard echoed in the sudden silence. Darren felt an odd sense of calm descend over him. "That bastard child is your grandson," he said quietly. "He's 9 years old. He loves dragons and art and makes the worst toast you've ever tasted. He has your mother's eyes, the same ones I have. And his mother. She raised him alone for 9 years, never asking for a penny, building her own successful career while giving him everything he needed. She's twice the parent you ever were. How dare you? No, how dare you?" Darren's voice rose slightly. "You taught me that the Emerson name means something, that it stands for integrity, for doing what's right no matter the cost. Well, this is me living up to that name." He opened the folder and began distributing copies of his resignation. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO. I'm also liquidating my personal shares in the company, about 15% of total holdings, I believe. I suggest you announce it as a mutual decision to pursue other opportunities. It'll look better for the merger." Eleanor Hamilton recovered first. "Without the Emerson heir at the helm, the merger terms will have to be completely renegotiated." "Then renegotiate." Darren straightened his tie. "I have more important things to worry about. My son has an art show next week." He turned to leave, but his father's voice stopped him. "If you walk out that door," Richard warned, "you're cutting yourself off from everything. The family fortune, your trust fund, all of it." Darren smiled sadly. "No, Father. You're cutting yourself off from everything that really matters." The elevator ride down from the 50th floor gave him time to text Cinnamon, "It's done." Her reply came instantly, "Come home. Home." Not his luxury penthouse or the Emerson estate, but a modest apartment filled with art supplies and love, and the sound of his son's laughter. By the time he reached his car, his company email had been deactivated and security was already changing the codes to his office. He drove straight to his penthouse, packed a few essential items, and called his personal attorney. "Martin, I need you to start the paperwork. I'm liquidating everything except my personal savings, and I need you to set up a new corporation, something small, manageable. I have some ideas I want to discuss." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, press speculation, and financial restructuring. Darren moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment near Abraham's school, using his personal savings, substantial, but nothing compared to the Emerson fortune, to start fresh. The media had a field day with the story, "Emerson heir abandons family fortune for love child." But for every sensational headline, there was a moment that confirmed he'd made the right choice. Abraham proudly showing him new artwork, family dinners filled with laughter, quiet evenings helping with homework. 1 month after his resignation, Darren sat in his new office, a converted industrial space with huge windows and exposed brick walls. On his desk sat Abraham's latest drawing, 3 dragons soaring together against a brilliant sky. The smallest dragon was learning to fly, supported by the 2 larger ones. His phone buzzed with a text from Cinnamon, "Dinner at 7, A's making his famous toast." Darren smiled, looking around at his new reality. His new company was small but growing, focused on supporting arts education and community development. He had enough to live comfortably, if not extravagantly, and more importantly, he had his family. A knock at his office door revealed Martin, his attorney, with a thick envelope. "The final paperwork from Emerson Industries," Martin said. "Once you sign, it's official. You're completely severed from the family holdings." Darren signed without hesitation, then checked his watch. "Sorry to rush you out, Martin, but I have a dinner date with my son. He makes terrible toast, but don't tell him I said that." As he drove home to Abraham's artwork and Cinnamon's quiet strength and the life they were building together, Darren felt lighter than he had in years. He'd sacrificed a fortune, but gained something far more valuable, the chance to be the father his son deserved. The headlines would fade, the gossip would die down, and what would remain was what mattered most. 3 dragons learning to fly together, supporting each other through whatever storms lay ahead. That night, over slightly burned toast and hot chocolate, Abraham asked, "Dad, do you miss being rich?" Darren looked at his son, then at Cinnamon, who was trying not to laugh at the state of her kitchen after Abraham's culinary efforts. "Actually," he said, "I've never felt richer than I do right now." And as they sat there, planning Abraham's next art show and discussing Darren's new business ventures, he knew that some sacrifices weren't really sacrifices at all. They were investments in what truly mattered: love, family, and the courage to protect both at any cost. Chapter 12. The Reunion. Abraham sat alone in his studio the morning of the wedding, tears falling silently onto his canvas. At 10 years old, he understood more than most children his age, understood the weight of sacrifice, the power of love, and the true meaning of wealth. His fingers trembled as he added the final brushstroke to his wedding gift, his heart so full it hurt. "Abraham." His mother's soft voice came from the doorway. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" He turned, and Cinnamon's breath caught in her throat. Her son, their son, sat surrounded by everything they'd built together, walls covered in dragons that had witnessed their journey, morning light streaming through windows that had seen both tears and triumph. But it was the look in his eyes that made her heart clench, joy and pain and wisdom far beyond his years. "I wrote them a letter," he whispered, holding up a tear-stained page, "for the ceremony. But I can't read it without crying." Cinnamon knelt beside him, her cream-colored wedding dress pooling around her like morning frost. "Then cry, my brave boy. Some words are meant to be spoken through tears." 6 months had passed since Darren walked away from his fortune, choosing their love over empire. 6 months of building something rare and precious from the ashes of sacrifice. They decided to marry quickly, not because they needed to, but because, as Abraham had said with his startling wisdom, when you find your real treasure, why wait to claim it? The studio had been transformed. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the morning breeze, their light soft as whispered promises. Abraham's dragons watched from every wall, no longer just paintings, but guardians of their unusual love story. A quiet sob from the doorway made them both turn. Darren stood there, one hand pressed to his mouth, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. In his other hand, he clutched a small wooden box carved with dragons. Abraham's design, though he didn't know it yet. "Dad?" Abraham rushed to him. "What's wrong?" Darren knelt, pulling his son close, then reaching out for Cinnamon until they were all tangled together, their tears mingling. "Nothing's wrong," he managed. "Everything's finally, perfectly right." He opened the box, revealing 2 simple bands that made Cinnamon gasp. They'd been forged from a single gold coin, the last heirloom of the Emerson fortune, transformed like their love into something new and priceless. The coin was worth millions, Darren explained softly. "But these rings are worth everything, because they're not about what I had, they're about what I chose." Abraham pulled away, running to his easel. "Like in my painting," he said, turning it to face them. The canvas stole their breath. 3 dragons soared through a sky that seemed alive with possibility. The largest had surrendered its golden scales, which transformed into wings for the others. Yet it flew higher than ever, lifted by something far more precious than gold. Around them, the sky wasn't just painted. It was alive with emotion, each brushstroke carrying the weight of their journey, each color a note in their love song. "Oh, Abraham," Cinnamon whispered, fresh tears falling. "My beautiful boy." As their small group of cherished guests gathered, the studio filled with a light that seemed to come from within, from hearts full to bursting, from love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. When the time came for the ceremony, Abraham stood before them all, his letter shaking in his hands. His voice cracked as he began to read. "Dear Mom and Dad, once there was a lonely little boy who drew dragons because they were strong enough to protect themselves from hurt. He had a mother who loved him more than life, who worked so hard to give him everything. But something was missing, and he filled that empty space with colors and wings and dreams. Then one day a man saw one of his dragons, and in that moment a miracle began. Not the kind that happens in fairy tales with magic wands and easy answers. The real kind, the kind that costs everything but gives back more. Dad, you didn't just give up a fortune for us. You taught me what real treasure looks like. It looks like burnt toast on Sunday mornings, like paint stains on expensive suits, because you never care about money when I want to show you my art. Like tears in your eyes when you watch me fly. Mom, you didn't just raise me alone for 9 years. You taught me that love doesn't need gold to be rich. It needs courage, patience, the strength to stand alone until the right person chooses to stand with you. Today, as you marry each other, I want you to know, every dragon I've ever drawn was really about this moment, about 3 hearts learning to fly together, about a love strong enough to lift us all. So take these rings, but remember, they're not really made of gold. They're made of every sacrifice, every tear, every moment one of us chose love over fear. They're made of us. And that makes them the most valuable things in the world. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Cinnamon and Darren stood wrapped in each other's arms, their tears falling freely. When they exchanged the transformed rings, their hands trembled so much they could barely manage it. "By the power of love that overcomes all obstacles," the officiant said, her own voice thick with emotion, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss tasted of tears and triumph, of endings and beginnings, of a love strong enough to transform the world. During the reception, Abraham worked quietly on a new painting. This one showed a night sky where stars fell like golden tears, each one carrying a message. For the child who feels lost. Family isn't just blood, it's choice. For the parent fighting alone, keep believing in love. For the heart heavy with wealth but empty of joy, true riches have wings. For everyone who reads our story, the greatest fortune is the courage to love without counting the cost. As night fell, the three of them stood together before the window. Below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, the Emerson Tower standing proud against the sky. But its golden lights paled in comparison to the wealth contained in their small studio, in paint-stained fingers and tear-stained cheeks, in dragons that had learned to fly and hearts that had learned to soar. "Look," Abraham whispered, pointing to where moonlight caught his wedding painting. "The dragons are crying too, but see how their tears turn to stars when they fall." Darren gathered his family close, his voice rough with emotion. "That's because some tears aren't sad at all. They're just love overflowing, making the world more beautiful wherever they fall." And there, in their sanctuary of art and love, three hearts beat as one, proving that the greatest wealth isn't counted in dollars or cents, but in the courage to choose love, the strength to sacrifice for it, and the wisdom to recognize true treasure when it appears in unexpected places. In the end, their story wasn't just about one night's consequence. It was about every choice that followed, every tear that fell, every moment love triumphed over fear. It was about three dragons learning to fly together, their wings made strong by sacrifice, their hearts made rich by love. And somewhere, in homes across the world, other hearts would read their story and find the courage to choose love over gold, truth over convenience, and the kind of wealth that can never be kept in banks, only in hearts brave enough to love without limits. The end. For every heart brave enough to choose love, for every parent who sacrifices in silence, for every child who dreams of family, and for everyone who believes that true wealth has wings, your courage makes the world richer. Your love makes it soar. Please don't forget to subscribe if